Welcome back. This is day 2 of human reproduction. So today we're actually going to be switching gears and we're going to start talking about the female reproductive system. Specifically, how does the anatomy of the female reproductive system allow for reproduction to happen? So remember, when we see this word anatomy, we're just talking about the structures. What are these structures required in order for reproduction to occur? Let's find out. But before we get into that, you guys have got 2 do now questions that review what we learned yesterday about the male reproductive system. So go ahead and pause this video. Answer those questions and press play when you're ready to review them. So number 1, what is the pathway of sperm from the point of production to ejaculation? Be specific with the anatomy or the structures. So for this one, you should mention as many structures as you can that we learned yesterday that sperm pass through, starting with where they're produced to where they leave the body. So we need to know that sperm are produced in the testes or the testicles. We can use those words interchangeably, but that is where sperm are produced. They're then going to travel through those tubes known as the vas deferens that connect the testes to the seminal vesicles. This word seminal looks kind of like semen, and that is because that is where the fluid portion of semen is added to the sperm to give them a little bit more fluid mobility. They've got some room to move around in. Now we also need to know that after the seminal vesicles, that the sperm is actually going to travel through the prostate as well. The prostate adds a little bit more liquid to the semen, not quite as much as the seminal vesicles, but we still need to know that the prostate adds fluid as well. Now, after the sperm leaves the prostate, those sperm are going to exit the body through the urethra. Now, you might remember talking about the urethra when we talked about the excretory system. So we need to know that for males, the urethra is responsible for removing not only urine, but sperm as well. All right, number 2. How are the testes and testosterone related? We need to know that testosterone is actually produced in the testes, and this is a hormone that regulates sperm production. All right. Now, the first thing I'm going to have us do today is actually make some introductory hypotheses. So remember, a hypothesis is an educated guess, meaning you may not know the answer to these questions, and that's totally fine. I just want to get you thinking and see what you know. So go ahead and pause this video, make a hypothesis for questions 1 through 3, and press play when you're ready to review it. All right, number 1, at what age can females no longer become pregnant? So menopause occurs in women at around an average age of 51. Now, menopause is when the hormone levels in women start declining, meaning that the menstrual cycle is not going to happen anymore. And the menstrual cycle is what allows a woman to become pregnant. So once that stops happening, it's game over. Not really, but as soon as menopause occurs, that woman can no longer become pregnant. It varies depending by the woman, but usually it occurs around an age of 51. Number 2, at what age can males no longer father children? Now, this one's kind of crazy, but the answer is there's actually no age limit. So theoretically, a man can father children until the day that he drops dead. Hopefully that's not the case, but there is no age limit here unless there's some sort of reproductive disability or disease that impacts that man. Number 3, why do the probability of birth defects increase with maternal age beginning at around age 35? So the reason for this is because a woman is actually born with all of the eggs that she will ever have in her lifetime. So the second that she is born, she already has all those eggs. But that also means that that woman's eggs are going to age as she does. And as we get older, things start working a little bit less well. And that same logic applies to our eggs. So the older that you get, so do those eggs, meaning that the probability of genetic damage will increase as you get older. Now, I've got 3 little fun facts about female fertility for you. You don't need to write these down, but just think about these. So fertility in women starts to decrease around age 32 and becomes more rapid around after age 37. Now, this does not mean a woman cannot have kids after age 32 or 37. My aunt had a child when she was 42 and she is perfectly healthy. So it can be done. It just becomes a little bit more risky with age. Now, women become less fertile as they age because, as we just said, they begin life with a fixed number of eggs in their ovaries. And that number is going to decrease as they grow older because every single month, a woman, as soon as she goes through or starts having her menstrual cycle, she's going to release an egg every single month. So that number is going to decrease as she gets older. Now, eggs are also not as easily fertilized in older women as they are in younger women. Again, as we get older, things start working a little bit less well, and that is just part of the aging process. And third, problems that can affect fertility, such as endometriosis and uterine fibroids, become more common with increasing age as well. So you may know someone with one of these two issues. My mom has endometriosis, which we will actually talk about in a few days. But again, as we get older, things start working a little bit less well, and these are some factors that can affect fertility as well. All right, now the first thing we're gonna do, or second, I guess, is we're going to read through a passage about the female reproductive system. You know the drill by now. We're going to read through this and highlight anything we think is important, and we'll use that information to answer the questions that follow. All right, so follow along with me as we read this passage. Each month, the female reproductive system prepares for a possible pregnancy by producing a mature egg cell, the female gamete. The mature egg cell is called an ovum. If the ovum is fertilized by a sperm cell, and if the fertilized ovum implants into the uterus, a pregnancy will begin. The fertilized egg will be fed and protected through 9 months of development. The main function of the female's reproductive system is to produce ova, which is the plural form of ovum. In addition, the female reproductive system prepares the female's body to nourish a developing embryo. Right, so now use that information to 1, define what is an ovum, and 2, what are the major roles of the female reproductive system? So number 1, the ovum is a female gamete. It is one mature egg cell. And remember that these gametes are actually produced through a process of meiosis called oogenesis, where one mature egg cell is created. Now, number 2, what are the major roles of the female reproductive system? So those 2 major roles are to first produce ova, produce those female gametes, and 2, prepare the body to nourish a developing embryo. All right, now we're next going to learn about egg production as well as the egg's path through the body. 2 ovaries are found within the female's abdomen. The ovaries produce egg cells. Ovaries also secrete estrogen and progesterone, the female sex hormones. The ovaries of a newborn female contain about 2 million immature eggs. Egg cells have 23 chromosomes, the haploid number, because eggs, like sperm, are formed through meiosis. This process begins in the egg cells of a female before she's actually born, but it becomes stalled in prophase of the first meiotic cell division. When a female reaches puberty, the levels of sex hormones rise. This event allows meiosis to start again. However, only 1 egg cell completes development each month inside of an adult female's ovaries. And now the egg's path. In contrast to the male's reproductive system, which produces millions of gametes each day, the female reproductive system produces 1 viable egg each month. Although a female is born with about 2 million eggs in her ovaries, only around 300 to 400 eggs will actually mature in her lifetime. When an egg cell matures, it's called an ovum. An ovum is about 75,000 times larger than that of a sperm cell, and it can actually be seen with the unaided eye. After an ovum is released from an ovary, cilia sweep the ovum into a fallopian tube. The fallopian smooth muscles, The fallopian smooth muscles lining the fallopian tube move the ovum down the tube towards the uterus. An ovum's journey through a fallopian tube usually takes around 3 to 4 days to complete. If sperm are present in the fallopian tube during this time, the ovum may become fertilized. All right, use that information to answer questions 3 and 4. So number 3, how are the female and male gametes alike and different? So we may remember that sperm are produced constantly, they are smaller, and they have 23 chromosomes. Remember, they have the haploid number. Okay, but egg cells are a little bit different. So egg cells, only 1 actually matures every month into an ovum, and they are 75,000 times larger than sperm. That's crazy. They're so much bigger, but they still contain 23 chromosomes, that haploid number with half the total number of chromosomes. Now, number 4, how long are viable sperm present in the female reproductive tract? This is another crazy fact, actually up to 5 days. So if sperm is present and it interacts with an egg at any point during those 5 days, fertilization will happen. Be careful out there, folks. Now, part C, let's talk about reproductive anatomy. So yesterday we talked about the different parts of the male reproductive system. Now we're gonna look at the structures within the female reproductive system. So the first structure we need to know are the ovaries. So the ovaries are where the eggs are stored, And again, one is going to be released every month into these neck structures known as the fallopian tubes. Now, a woman has 2 ovaries, but only one is utilized every month. And usually those ovaries are going to take turns releasing an egg. So it'll alternate every month. One month, maybe the left ovary releases an egg, and then the next month, the right one does. It just alternates. And when that egg is released, it's going to travel through these tubes known as the fallopian tubes. Now, we do need to know that this is where fertilization occurs. Okay, so if at any point during this process, sperm enter the woman's body, those sperm are going to travel up through these fallopian tubes. And if they run into an egg in the fallopian tube, that is where fertilization occurs, right? If fertilization occurs, that egg is going to continue traveling down into this next structure, which is known as the uterus. And again, if that egg is fertilized, it's actually going to implant itself into the wall of the uterus and prepare to start growing and dividing. All right, that uterus is connected to the outside world through the cervix. So the cervix is the opening that connects the vagina to the uterus. And again, the vagina is going to be that opening from the outside world. So uterus is where the baby develops. Cervix is kind of like the bridge between the uterus and the vagina, and then the vagina is the opening. All right, make sure you guys are familiar with this. The Regents likes to put questions on the female reproductive system, so make sure you guys know these structures. Now, another thing the Regents likes to do is actually take that diagram and turn it on its side. So this is another view of the female reproductive system with these same structures we just went over, just from a different viewpoint. So take that structure we just looked at and turn it on its side, and let's see if we can figure out what A, B, C, and D are. So A is going to be, again, the ovaries. So I know it's a weird viewpoint, but that ovary is where the eggs are going to be released into the structure B, which is the fallopian tube. The egg will then travel through those fallopian tubes into the next structure that we know as the uterus. And again, if that egg is fertilized in the fallopian tubes, it's going to implant itself in the wall of the uterus. Now, structure D is a new one. Now, we've talked about this structure before, and we actually pointed out this structure in the male reproductive system yesterday, but we haven't talked about this one today. So think about, what do you think structure D is? It shares an opening with the uterus. Okay, so we know that this area down here is actually going to be the vagina. So think about what else has to exit through the vagina. Well, structure D is actually going to be the bladder. So the bladder and the uterus are actually really close together. And this is actually why women, when they are pregnant, have to go to the bathroom a lot. Because if there's a baby growing in this uterus, it's going to be exerting a lot of pressure onto that bladder and makes them have to go to the bathroom. So this is actually the urethra, where urine exits the body. All right. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about today are 2 of the hormones that we need to know for the female reproductive system. We have heard about these before, and those are estrogen and progesterone. So these are the primary sex hormones found in females. Both are produced in the ovaries and are responsible for the development of female secondary sex characteristics in female bodies as well. And this is also what is responsible for the menstruation cycle. So every single month when you get your period, these hormones are to blame. Okay, so I'm going to highlight primary sex hormones produced in the ovaries, secondary sex characteristics, menstruation cycle. Okay. Now, we also need to know that the estrogen is responsible for building something known as the endometrium, and the progesterone maintains it. Now, you might be looking at me like, what the heck is the endometrium? I know you said something about endometriosis earlier, but like, I don't know what this is. Now, if we look at this diagram that is on my screen, it's actually not on your paper, and that's okay. You'll see that the endometrium is actually the lining found right here. And that is because the endometrium is the uterus lining that forms every month in preparation for a fertilized egg. So every month during your menstrual cycle, that endometrium, that lining of the uterus, is going to thicken. And it thickens, it basically braces for impact, preparing for a baby to start developing. So it's going to thicken in preparation for that fertilized egg. However, if no fertilized egg implants itself into that uterine wall, that endometrium is actually going to start shedding itself. And when that endometrium starts shedding itself, it eventually has to be excreted or removed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your period. So your period is just that uterine lining shedding itself and removing itself from your body. All right, lovely things today. Now, using that information, guys, go ahead and answer the exit ticket questions that are at the bottom of this worksheet, or click on the link rather, and make sure you submit this. I cannot speak today. Make sure you submit your exit ticket as well as these notes before tomorrow morning at 8:30, and have a wonderful day. I will see you guys tomorrow.